The Well, I put a keyboard tag on music science, which is distinct from music theory. And this is where and how, as I've noted as evidence in the past and through time, the sciences share an identity. And individuals, though we are reliant upon experts who know things we don't, we have means to use what we do know to be able to discern if they are leaving out and the value of how they are leaving out the smallest finite detail. Not just the value of the finite, but the value of the order of the finite, relevant to where and how three identities of volume are bound, where mind works with the order of the finite, the value of it to where and to how it is invisible, but still discernibly valuable, and with what is active as an order of value to where and how we have invisible but discernible, even if we close our eyes. And this is where no living consciousness could be blind. All exceptions, exception nature, even if you make medically conditions, you draw people poison, in other words. This is regarding where the mind is the possession of a system that communicates through where and how we have black pupils, whites of eyes, for example. Always that is true, not denying the slightest exception, not denying the significance of it, of the value of it in all relative contexts. See, relativity was taken as a theory. All kinds of opinion natures, formally, informal, and other, where and how syntactically at all locations. Certain type of victims, people A through Z, it knew would have to react wrongly to the increasing relevance of what happened in semi-ancient times to where and how people say A, therefore B. So, in reference to where and how people bring up Boolean logic in the value or significance or the relevance of that, and or simultaneously of their quality of debate over such things, which are relevant to where and to how. For example, American history comes with simple things that are true always. They're not that are not denying where no one denies the slightest finite detail, doesn't value them having been denied. And when you do that and you look back at history, you discern and with what you know with your experience, not through summary convictions of history, leaving out finite details with their convictions. And hold on a second, please. Yes. So it's relevant where the integrity of an individual, when they call out where and how it is relevant so many ways, where the sciences simultaneously pretended to have integrity, simultaneously pretend to have integrity, but don't simultaneously, because the mind uses what is simultaneously known, where the invisible but discernible is discerned distinctly from, but not distinctly from. Then with where and how math relates. See, but math uses exceptions in exception nature, as all parts of your body do, individually grouped and together, as a semi-nature relationship to your body's identity. But that identity too has relevance to how the identity that has bound, individually grouped and together, 5 distinct identities of sequence / simultaneous nature, where and how we have an extent of possession over, and it has possession over us simultaneously. The juxtaposition of that, those 3 are bound, where and how we are a quality of hypergeneration, where things go away, but even the things go away are adding to the identity of volume. That is the one, that is the genesis, the generation of all things. Only the extent of it is debatable. The significance of having a scientific value for this. And the people and the consciousness that left behind, the way it is worded, the first part of the Old Testament, the first part of the Quran, they knew that the people that would pretend to be for the religion in its name would ask to have the name used wrongly and or simultaneously in collusion with a shell game, where and how it's being used remotely are the counters. Also using and having used logic, having used the significance of how the sciences have a shared identity, constant, and have a individual identities constant distinctly and non-distinctly, because this is also how hyper simultaneously, distinctly, not distinctly and simultaneously, which science reveals we have the needs to discern. A hyper simultaneous distinct from regular simultaneous, because that too has conjunction to the value of the simultaneous and to the value of the order of the finite and to the value of the order of what is active, where and how they are distinct identities of order, but they are non-distinct. So, all right, have a big, okay, thank you. Have a great day. What is in other words? So these are bound. The value of sequence true before this is only increasing before the smallest finite detail of anything that could be made in time here active now. It has one aspect of humanity's identity of volume and science, therefore names, relevant where and how those names and our uses of it and of everything and our subject treatments, all predicate treatments. Therefore, obviously, predicate acts treatments relative. See, this breaching method knew that modern countries individually grouped and together would be pseudo-sophistication, self-valuing while countering things they would need to counter as fact treatment nature. Counters of things like criminal insidiousness natures of positive and negative treatments, which are simultaneously identity treatments, which are simultaneously hyper-identity treatments. Now, see, nature would have shown us this if any one person had been allowed at any age to connect where and how correlation / discorrelation is and has gotten away with being And that involves where and how it comes through, and stays with where and how it employs. Countries grouped, individuals, modern countries, A through Z, individuals grouped in together, tactical ulterior. And when I say together, that's when they say, when they speak for humanity as a value and or the significance of it, and regarding how other people are using it and significance of it. One of the reasons this is increasingly better than perfect, used remotely to make things debatable that are not debatable appear that they are, and they get away with it, is per how, before any context where you had formally what is told to you is legitimate debate, there were people of each age, of fact, human nature, simultaneously knowing, having been shown means, needs, to discern that and how. Since they were youngest kids, they were forced to ignore finite details, group details, and identities' actual course, and the relevance of it being and having been applied to this filter of criminal insidiousness, natures of positive and negative treatments of logic that cannot afford the short words of any individual at any age, with use by the revelations that are right there, not just simultaneously when you understand the breaching method against Native Americans had already been applied against and sustained against the colonizing countries and their members, as that which had slavery also entrenched distinctly against everyone, including their own members, North and South colonies, before our founding parents were even born. That was measured and maintained. The laws had it so everyone was supposed to speak and pretend their sense and sensibilities, as Jane Austen's race, but greater than what she could conceive, and when there was exceptions, she was not allowed to voice them. In other words, regarding complete possession over the nervous system, the physical bodies of everyone. The fact that A, therefore B, the Boolean logic of everyone, as it is now named after a person, effectively by a breaching method used to measure and maintain. Demonstrably, having had conscious uses of everyone who steps into the formal logic treatments. Because if they're using the short words and method of thought, or theory, speculation, contemplation, observation, perception, the way it needs it as itself, as the identity of volume that is making more and more of its identity of volume as a space/existence. It is also through what is going away, but first comes in. So this is the quality of diffusion. Music. So each of the notes of music, even though they're only a distance, the distance comes with a distinct identity of relativity, for example. Again, so music theory and relativity theory is getting in the way with the short words. It means by where and how nature is demonstrating us. In other words, because what makes it have more than a distance is the application of a sign of measurement through of their identities of relationship to themselves, which this, with all things, is in demonstration that all identities of volume, individually grouped and together, are bound in such a way where even the smallest finite part of the most complicated, massive body, before it was created and while it was created, so being, the second it started being, it was hyper additionally being as another identity of itself that has a sequence / simultaneous nature is the phenomenon of the only one that could be temporary, but in only increasing volume. And only so it is the only one that is temporary / lasting, which is relevant because it, like every other identity of volume, has an identity of relativity to how it is a sequence nature, distinctly from how it is a simultaneously, and distinctly from how it is the value of a slash, the solidus. I believe there are more names for it. My theory is that there are 5, and relevant to where and to how. I'm going to show you how you could show not just the lies of, everybody. In other words, also relevant to this, where the sciences have been self-valued abridged and that being and having been used remotely. Therefore, the branches, all the places connected, where everyone goes back home to. Not just to those natures of corruption. We know that there are more that we could list than there are streets in our towns and cities. Not by accident. Forgiveness is not to give up. It was because of the relevance of differential criminal foreign influences that we still have not had one scientific voice. I mean, there are exceptions, but when there are exceptions, they attach that person and they do this to everyone at the same time, which is also relevant to where and how they're saying some people are good, some people are bad. And it's also relevant to where and to how they're leaving out what they're actually conscious of when they interpret crime statistics. And where and how they're doing it from. Locations they're leaving out. Also further, how they could discern that. See, but people don't speak about and how nature wants us to, which is use what we know is true always, not denying the slightest finite detail, not valuing that left out. And then and then still trying to check to make sure the smallest finite detail is not left out by using the simultaneous. What you know is simultaneously true always. By using a finite detail, ignore it. That's not a system as the one. As skies above ground. All gather round. Earth's a special difference is distinctly, non-distinctly, and hyper-simultaneously our own. Earth has no criminal foreign influences, let alone one's self-value, used remotely. Towards increasing identities of ulterior forms and natures and methods of corruption. Also, it knew correctly would be manifest apart with where they had been countering the real causes of criminal and ceaseless natures of positive and negative treatments, identity treatments, other things like others ourselves, like where and how worse than gross incompetence alone is being and having been used remotely is actually recorded, where and how the integrity of agencies is brought or of branches of government, and their individuals individually grouped or together when it is brought up, because it has direct relevance to where and to how this breaching method was correct in knowing that all kinds of formal criminal insidiousness natures of identity treatments, uses of them, as that certain type of victim slash hyper victim, victim predator slash hyper predator. In other words, that we know was employed. See, the significance is left out and denied value, and people tell you you're crazy, no matter who you are. If you bring it up, what's true always. In other words, we know which trials were partially made up. We know that it's self-valued by logic when it leaves out the significance of the black course of black pupils, whites of eyes being and having been abridged. We know that at each age, depending on what identity, depending on a whole bunch of things at once. But no matter who you are, you're an individual. If you try to speak short words that are using truth, that is not valuing where truths could, when how truths could be and are used for lies. It's not valuing even truths that used by lies of others. And for example, forcing and defending their own behavior and emotions and motivations, narratives at locations on the internet, fake specifically to go and stay collusions, increasingly where the interbranch was never a free identity. It is better than perfect. There are recorded better than perfect, remotely criminally foreign influence uses of every member of every branch of government, individually grouped and together. So we have this hyperscope. We have black pupils, whites of eyes, and experience to know. One thing that was true always, not denying the slightest exceptions, is that a human fact, human nature breaching method was sustained against Native Americans before our founding parents were even born. And it was sustained against the people from all the other countries since semi-ancient times before that. And it was playing games with where and how we are individually grouped and together by the identity that is all things at once per science. And is playing games with when they speak with words of God, for example. If they did it with honesty, not valuing the slightest exception left out, having been left out, the significance of that, the answers would have been revealed by now. So we have self-valued needs to have answers not revealed by now, because a whole bunch of types of experts were employed specifically, knowing that they needed a certain natures of identities as this certain type of victim slash hyper victim, victim predator slash hyper victim. The A through Z have only been allowed to opine regarding the significance of theater that blames all the negative things for where and how they speak for positive, where and how science reveals that we have to show that that it requires treatments of positive, negative, and of identity simultaneously to be able to discern where and how the finite and all the finite and all the simultaneous hyper-evidential facts, hyperfacts, hyperfactual denied, where and how those criminal insidious natures of theater, motivations, narratives too, were employed offensively and shown needs to hide preemptively, simultaneously, actively, and increasingly, that they are going to need to hide finite, grouped, and lies regarding the conjunction, the value of the conjunction, the significance of everything. Now, breaching method knew this, and it showed them that how to get away with it. Specifically, knowing that it would be humanity getting over on our own, everywhere the human species body is standing, relevant to where and to how. A breaching method, singular, made self-valued, rolls with logic and with defenses of logic as volume science /S, tactically ulterior from how we are volume science /S, and employed them to pretend others simultaneously too. Employed also the appearances of motivations manifest with that. That is the greater than and more finite than money to itself, fluent through our nations each, self-valued roles where and how the sciences have been used, abridged by others other than pretended, and where and how that the significance of that is being demonstrated to every individual. But every individual sickly distinctly is prevented, means to use short words, where even if you make a mistake, as long as you're doing it with the right nature, the answer will come. You'll get your thing over. In other words, if someone says the breaching method is what caused slavery, and it did so consciously with people from all different countries, even people consciously that called themselves black, and made other people call that difference black to meanings other than they were, as programming, where and how, again, these are things that are debated by natures and styles of logic that can't defend themselves and afford us to defend it at the same time. Control the mind. So they have wire crime action methods. They have evidence reception methods that involve where and how they make positive and negative treatments regarding little kids and regarding elderly, where there are instances at elderly homes, where there are instances at campuses that are being and haven't been, referred to with subject treatments. See, there were a whole bunch of conjunctions to Central Connecticut State University with FBI and with other agencies and with the military, who are people that are criminally foreign influence since they were kids, relevant to them. So, in other words, it's nothing personal against them. I don't even know them. In other words, this is a method at times where everyone's going to be. And it also pretends it keeps people, again, it needs everyone's passions and emotions and motivations, narratives, and their nature's narratives. And that's all, this is where they communicate other than they say, everyone, relative to the, as one of the proofs, hyper-evidential, which is where and how the significance of how it is short words explain the course of black people's whites of eyes was and is abridged sickly distinctly from before our founders were born right through their lifetime, that left off the communications about how to overcome this. And still, there was one breaching method and there was recorded, conscious, measured, and maintained uses of all counters to where they had leveraged against every individual, every group and natural difference, and made up one, juxtaposed too, specifically to exploit us through ourselves, where and how we are actually syntactically manifest. I tell best box things. Reaches to the sky to tell you things. Do that, take some. So the difference is with science. See, there's a difference when nature and the value of that is interpreted to discern what's going to be positive or negative per its system. And nature debates, it's nature's one thing. No, in other words, where they claim it one thing, and where they refer to the dictionary, and where people fight and defend their logic, we think we know this is relevant. In other words, we need a hyper dictionary. And this can come with the Burroughs book and all kinds of mean stacking, but it cannot it cannot and will not work if it comes through something. If you try to entertain the logic of yourself, entertaining the logic that any politician spoke, you're a joke. That's the breaching method measures and maintain that strictly distinctly from how they measure and maintain exploitation of us themselves, knowing that. Where and how sickly distinctly each individual as the branches of government, as one body, since they were little kids, each one of them, they were forced to continue with perception, using other people's names and the value of what they heard, where and how that is effectively employed to effectively keep, where and how relevant is how effectively kept are other things, others or ourselves, being blamed for what the breaching method caused and is increasingly being demonstrated, causing, which is simultaneously too being maintained, blamed on other things, others ourselves, as self-cultivation of it, which is simultaneous criminal insidiousness uses of the country's names, the area's names, the location's names, the ground's voicings, like the species going extinct, like defenses of the criminal insidious natures of positive treatments in reaction to it, wanting and needing to stay on the subject treatment of the desperation. That's what one thing the breaching method employed, all kinds of natures of criminal insidious natures of positive treatments and negative treatments that are relied upon by identities of logic within the programming of the database relationships that came since before computers, and relevant to where and to how the obfuscation of how computers work and time used simultaneously, too fast, too slow, and all exceptions in exception nature previous to that and simultaneously with that, or as that, and to come being self-valued right now here actively. People are valuing logic that can't defend itself and afford properly demonstrated what the logic of past leaderships was worth and how it was pretended to be other, how it was forced, tricked, hurt, persuaded, and worse, how it was is pretended other, and how they left out exceptions in exception nature relevant to the interpretation of this, while being experts that speak on the significance of exceptions and of exception nature to programming languages and to the value of hardware and to the value of security identities and identities of logic and uses of passions and emotions. There are people associated with the elections, locations, with involved with this breaching method that was recorded better than perfectly employed since before our founding parents were born. All kinds of hyper evidential proofs of it are standing, like the fact that and how all these things are functionally reliant upon how the suburbs were designed with slavery entrenched northern colonies, southern colonies, in the design that was put forward with that torture method that went with slavery, that simultaneously, which went with simultaneously with pretending other, and as laws forcing everyone to pretend other, because it wasn't just, it was slavery against every single person, sickly distinctly, and no one was allowed to speak about that, which was unwritten but sensed. And this is a method that knew that it can't afford how nature wants us to discern how what we say is distinct from what we communicate, and how even when that is discernible relative to things that are relative to each other, like where they make evidences, treatments at interbranch locations, they left out where and how I caught them at all other locations, being and having been used remotely since they were kids. So they tell people to change others, and they influence people to change others' words. And this is recorded, and the news media does this to shut people's voices out because they have roles with their worst patients and criminals with this, and against innocent people too. And this is with their worst patients and criminals since before they were caught. And this is with their roles with recorded means to observe consciously overt criminal enterprises and criminal insidiousness being and having been countered wrongly, and where uses of all words like theory with the law are used effectively by a breaching method to measure and maintain distinctly from our own, but also not distinctly because it is measuring and maintaining through our own, where and how they speak for the law as defended and or not, and simultaneously all three of those identity or volume sciences are the complete possession of a method that effectively measures and maintains them all hyper fakes pretending other. Now, to evidences of this is related to a whole bunch of different subjects and distinct natures of organized crime recorded being and having been self-valued on and off channeled campuses, on and off elderly homes, on and off the locations where they were instances as presented to solve problems when they come to a head, and where relevant is where and how the interbranch and foreign inclusions, they against their own, ours against our own, also with overt criminal enterprises and private ones. They have roles with uses of corners of streets and corners of buildings and of social media for evidences crimes that also involves intercampuses and uses of subject treatments where they bring up and where they came to need policies relevant to the behavior of others. It was, is, where, and how that behavior was employed, not just by the breaching method, but by the breaching method measuring, maintaining behavior treatments, leaving out finite active details like sequence shifts. There are people involved with Facebook and with Celeste Wells. I do not know Celeste Wells. She was influenced by men and women and kids to make a quick exception to pretend other when I was in middle school with a whole bunch of other people who did that, who also have the phenomenon of roles with names on the child sex offender registry, who have and had interbranch women and ones associated with overt criminal enterprises, also, and private ones, also timed roles with illusions planting and significance denials, aggressions roles, which is also important and critically important, because these are also people recorded consciously who use pretending to be against racism or against people's identities for what a whole plethora of reasons that cannot defend that logic and afford to discern what really unfolded before that at locations associated with themselves. So former mayors have roles with names associated with locations next to where the witch trials place is, next to the place where George Washington had to come with James Madison's plan and counter-extort the other founders. As we, and I mean, not the first they had to counter-extort the other founders, but then they had to counter-extort help in Wethersfield, Connecticut, right before they won the last battle of the Revolutionary War. They had to secure a means to defend themselves and everyone from what was entrenched with the mental health, the psychiatry, psychology, sociology type equivalents of identity of the ground roles with that torture method, breaching method, constitution abridged, therefore human hyper-native education as presented by nature itself to humanity before fact-treatment nature, therefore reception of nature, became criminally foreign influence, became entertainment of value systems where and how we are individuals grouped and together that can't defend their logic with that and afford the short words and revelations, let alone the protraction of the short words of revelations of anyone using how identities volume as that which is all things at once and that have been and to come. That identity of volume as the hyper simultaneous, which we see also is the identity that all the distinct manifestations as plant life, animal life, cell body, cell nucleus, cell wall have. Species, not just living bodies, distinct living bodies that are beyond our control one way. Group, think, to use a phrase reported through Fox News and CNN, that our government uses, and with other governments where all coalitions were relevant leading up to the World Trade Center attack, in the attack context and since. Again, where and how recorded, as actually recorded, I should know, is where and how logic, entertaining humanity, individually grouped and together, ulterior from how we are, by the hypernative system, It cannot afford the short words of any other individual unaccosted, because theirs were accosted. Little kids have the means by no understanding the value of not see things. Some things that make things, the breaching method made things effectively harder to discern, but that only makes it easier if you use them to discern. If you use this method that goes by what is true always, not denying the slightest exception, not valuing the slightest exception denied. And then further knowing you have to constantly, this is a quality of fact, human nature, that reveals evolution's fruits, gifts, means out of nowhere, because it is an identity of relationship to itself that makes use of Earth's special difference that is positive to itself, where and how has a especially critical and unchanging relationship to where and to how the identity of the hyper-simultaneous will only stay positive onto all parts of space/existence. Constantly one way, increasingly. There is the phenomena of the appearance of exceptions that are in demonstration of where and how hyper-additional nature is being made, which is not just a way to explain how one identity of volume as space/existence is an only increasingly valuable identity of volume. Here or forced from here, Leith of Hadith. Earth's value, but where and how as ourselves, because the rest of the difference as Earth, where there is no difference coupled with Earth's a special difference, and the resulting simultaneously manifest, additional volume where value is nature/nature is value, and where it is relevant, where and how they are bound invisibly and hyper-invisibly as subject predicate are, with a distinct identity of simultaneous nature, not just as the sentence. In other words, so short words are prevented. They have been using wire crime methods that have the identities of other agencies involved with the worst and criminal incompetence of all identities of law. Everywhere the species' body is standing for a certain type of child abuse that employ counters to it, natures to it, condition relative to it, and within how the exceptions too, specifically, so when anyone discerns that, it employed exceptions too. So people get involved, preventing others from using short words. The FBI has crime methods where and how the roles with other police forms, but also where that with group crime methods. See, the breaching method effectively knew that modern countries individually grouped them together. There would be 3 different crime methods that they would self-value being and having been, while being a whole bunch of additional ones and natures of them that are fact, human nature oriented, that are motivations, narratives, and natures oriented. And also where and how this is differential, a special criticality, orientation. Here, the campus of forever now returns to orientation. So the breaching method knew that people would have to, that would value the only means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures, being through systems tactical ulterior from the only way that ways that could, or ways individually or plural that could. They'll have to, because that's all being generated by the one identity as space/existence. It has the value of sequence true before that. You have the value really of what is the value to come. Boxing is fun one way, he made pray. Every job is fun one way, but he made pray. But they're only hyper fun one way. Thank you, people. Thank you, Mr. Dick.